think it's working. You do the 2-point calibration, and then you have your 10 ml over here. You take this magnetic stirrer, or this thing that works with a magnetic stirrer. And this is like jerry rigging stuff. And essentially you just cover it, and this has liquid in it, so then it mixes everything really well. And then you take this, and then again between every run you just want to take a little bit of DI and then just like splash it a little. And you can use the same Kim wipe, just a dry spot, clean that, have it hanging there, and then move this thing with the water inside. So
while it's still running?
Yeah, while it's still running. So sometimes it hits, the stirrer hits the reader, which is fine, but that's where you kind of like move it around and you get to the sweet spot where the stirrer is mixing the solution but not hitting the Acumen. And that you like, again, it's like trial and error. You just move it around and shimmy it around just to see what fits. And then, so this like stays over here. It has 10 ml. You put this in, let the reader again stabilize, and it tells you what your initial pH is, and then you write down what your initial pH is over here. Our initial acid volume, we start with 0. You don't want bubbles in here, so when you're refilling it with more acid as you start using up the acid, when you're filling it, just make sure there are no bubbles. And again, I don't think there's an isotopic reason why there are no bubbles, but that's just like, you're not going to get an accurate volumetric reading if you have a bubble. So that's why we don't want bubbles. But, okay, and then basically how to read it. You start twisting and turning. The more you do it, the more you realize how many turns you can do. I remember like the first time I did it, I was just like, do a little and then see how much it drops, and then do a little. So that takes a while, but now I'm just like full turns to like get to a certain level, and then I start slowing how much I'm turning. And then I just made like a sort of like cheat sheet on how to read it. So essentially, the increments on the bigger scale are every 0.1, and then the increments on the rotating scale are 0.02. And we do a 3-point reading. So for example, if I'm stopping over here, that's actually going to be a 0.4. Yeah, that's my final reading. So it's like 1.4, and then so you get your first two, you get your big number, and then you get your first decimal point from this big scale, and then your second decimal point is where you are on this rotating bar. So that goes from 0, 1, 2, 3 till 9. So it can be like, if I'm, for example, this is 8 and 9. So then I went for 8, and then the smaller bars are every 0.02 increments. So then you have 4 of them, 2, 4, 6, 8. So then if it's like stopping where the star is, that's going to be a 8.
Okay. So do you always put an even number for if it's like between 2?
Yeah.
You can put.
You only go to the lower one.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. And then.
Can you write that? If it's between 2 and the lower one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'll think you put it and type it up too.
To your value.
Thank you.
Between. So that's for the third decimal point. There. Yeah. That's actually that. Cool.
Okay.
And then you put that as your final acid value. And then your final acid value for the next becomes your initial acid value.
Okay.
So when I have like 10, 15 of these, there's a couple of things that I always fill up is like the final, because I always try and stick to 4.5. The last can change from like 0 to 2, 4.5 to 0 to 4.52. So I just fill that up. When you finish, again, these are 4 samples, so there's no way we are going to finish the 2 milliliters. But if you have a lot, you get closer to finishing, and that's where like the refilling comes in, and you refill pretty much this guy
Okay.
every time. But then also once we are done tomorrow, we will be refilling it so it's completely full again for the next use.
Okay.
That was annoying. But yeah, and then the other thing that I always also like fill up while I'm waiting for things to stabilize is like I try to get as close to 10 as possible. So if I have to change, I can like just erase it, but I know like those are the values that I'm looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the closer you start dropping, the closer you start getting to 4.5, the faster the scale starts dropping, right? It's exponential. So if the initial pH value is like 8, it's going to take a few turns for it to get to like 7, 6, 5, but then once it hits that sweet spot, even like a small turn that you do, you'll start seeing the numbers fall off quite quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, so the closer you get to like 5 or like even 5.5, like the slower you can start twisting this.
Okay.
Yep.